There are a lot of Yakuza games. From mainlines to spin-offs to remakes, the series has seen over 20 releases over the past 2 decades, but with a catalog so large, it can be hard to figure out which games are actually worth playing. Is Yakuza 3 really that bad? Does Lost Judgment have the best combat? Should newcomers really start with Yakuza 0? Will we ever see Akiyama get his own spin-off game? It's an unrelated question, but a man can dream. Well, today, dear viewer, you will be given the definitive Yakuza game tier list, from the wisest and most enlightened video game enjoyer on the planet, YouTube user Nyan, aka me. For clarity, S tier means a game that is one of my favorites, and represents the peaks of the franchise. These are games that are 9s or 10 out of 10s. A tiers are also really great games, but not the best of the best, so these would be 8s. B's are 7 out of 10s, and C's are 6 out of 10s. I don't think there are any necessarily bad games in the series, except for one, so even if I give a game a C, I don't think it's a bad game. That category is for never again, because as the label reads, I'm never playing those games again. With that all out of the way, let's begin.
Yakuza 0.
It only makes sense to start this tier list in canonical order, so of course, we'll start with Yakuza 0. Ah, Yakuza 0. Pure peak. This is still one of the best games in the series, even with so many new additions since it came out in 2015. Zero is a prequel game that tells its own unique story with characters from the rest of the series. It was also the second game in the franchise that I played, and it was the one that really hooked me and got me so invested into playing more. Zero has dual protagonists, that being the series' main character Kazuma Kiryu, along with another fan favorite Goro Majima, with each having their own playable map in Kamurocho and Sotenbori respectively. This was a brilliant idea, and experiencing different pieces of the larger narrative through their unique perspectives was super interesting to play through. Zero takes place in the late 1980s in Japan, during the Bubble Era. The main plot is the conflict surrounding the Empty Lot, a piece of land that conflicting Yakuza groups are fighting over, and Kiryu and Majima are directly involved in all of it. There's a lot more going on in the story besides that, but I'll keep it brief as to not spoil or give too much away. Zero has an amazing story, a ton of great side content, and each character has 4 different fighting styles that are each a ton of fun. This game is an obvious S tier.
Yakuza Kiwami.
This is the actual first game I ever played in the series. Kiwami is a great game, and sets up the rest of the series really well. It's a 2016 remake of the original Yakuza 1, and reuses a ton of assets from Yakuza 0. In fact, a lot of this game is just things repurposed from 0, like Kiryu's movesets and styles, to character models, minigames, and more. It's still a really fun game, although, after playing through it so many times, I will say the story can feel a bit unfocused at certain points. A lot of the missions can feel like random shenanigans in Kamurocho, unrelated to the main plot, but it's still fun, especially on a first playthrough. Yakuza 1 is all about Kiryu leaving prison after a decade for a crime he didn't commit, and the story revolves around his search for his love interest Yumi, as well as the Yakuza's pursuit for a missing 10 billion yen. As a note, I have played a lot of the original Yakuza 1 on PS2, and I would rank them around the same. Yakuza Kiwami is still a great title and gets an A tier for me.
Yakuza Kiwami 2.
Yakuza Kiwami 2 is a very fun game. This was the second in the series to use the Dragon engine, after Yakuza 6, which is still used today in the most recent titles. Kiwami 2 is another remake that was released in 2017. The story is really enjoyable and focuses on Kiryu's initial attempt to bring peace between the Yakuza families amidst a possible war, but it all goes wrong quickly. To this day, Ryuji is still one of my favorite antagonists in the entire series. I have yet to play the original Yakuza 2, but I can safely say Kiwami 2 is a lot of fun. The Dragon engine combat was much more experimental back then, but still feels fun and satisfying to engage with. I really like the final fight and the ending, although it's a shame we never saw more of Sayama. Well, kind of. Overall, Kiwami 2 is A tier.
Mystery Game.
We have now arrived to one of the most controversial titles in the series. The community has been split on this title for years. Some call it top tier, while others think it should be wiped from history. Well, as you probably already figured it out, we are of course talking about Yakuza Dead Souls, a non-canon game where a zombie outbreak hits Kamurocho, and Kiryu, Majima, Akiyama, and Ryuji Goda lead the battle against it. Dead Souls is the peak of the series in my opinion. So great in fact, that I'm gonna put it in the incomplete tier. Not because I've never played it, of course, but for other personal reasons. Yeah.
ブロックすみませんヤクザ3.
Okay, but for real, Yakuza 3 is a game of all time. I'm not one of the people to say Yakuza 3 is bad. I think there are a lot of admirable parts to it, and there's a lot to like. Kiryu runs the Morning Glory orphanage in Yakuza 3, and a lot of the game is spent in Okinawa with Haruka and the other kids Kiryu has taken in. I actually like this aspect of the game. It's a nice break from all the Yakuza shenanigans he's dealt with in the previous games. The main gripes people have with Yakuza 3 are the combat and the pacing of the story. The combat can definitely be annoying to deal with, and I remember a specific fight earlier in the game against CIA agents that actually made me want to throw my controller at light speed through my wall. It has the nickname Blockuza 3 for a reason, as in basically every encounter, enemies will block constantly, making Kiryu feel a lot weaker than before. But it's not all bad. Kamurocho is back, but Okinawa is here too. And as a setting, it's actually really great. And it's a location that I would very much like to see return, especially in the new engine. It's also interesting because RGG really loves reusing assets, but Okinawa was only fully accessible in 3, and then never seen again besides the small beach and orphanage. The story is all over the place, but in short, Kiryu is roped back into Yakuza shenanigans, even though he doesn't particularly want to be. It's a game about Yakuza groups and the government wanting to take land for money, and a bunch of other unimportant political stuff. The narrative definitely suffers from bad pacing, convoluted story beats, and boring sections, but Mine is a really great antagonist, and the game has an undeniable charm to it. Rikiya has become a fan favorite character, and his inclusion is a great example of why people have an attachment to this entry. It's just silly as hell. Yakuza 3 is not a bad game, but it's also not great. Yakuza 3 is getting a C tier for me.
Yakuza 4
I had a pretty good time with Yakuza 4. This was the first release to have multiple protagonists in the series, and it was a really refreshing and exciting change. There are 4 playable characters to match the title, which are Kiryu, Akiyama, Saejima, and Tanimura, all of which are fun to play and offer different experiences in their combat. It's too bad we'll never see Tanimura again. And that's not a spoiler, RGG actually just hates this guy for some reason. The story is... well, no one likes Yakuza 4 for the story alone. It's more Yakuza beef between families and power struggles that are admittedly interesting, although sometimes drawn out. As usual, the main selling point is the combat and the characters, and they both deliver here. The story isn't atrocious, there are just certain things that if you've played through this game in its entirety, you'll know what I mean. Rubber bullets. There are definitely standout moments in the story, but there's also a lot of stupid aspects that just bring it down. But I think it's a game worth playing if you enjoy the series. There's decent side content and a lot of variety in fights due to the constant switching between characters, with an interesting, although occasionally incredibly dumb story. And Akiyama is playable, so what more can you ask for in a game? B tier.
The Yakuza 5
I really loved playing through Yakuza 5. It's a very personal game that deals with a lot of themes not seen before in the series. It's also a very long game with 5 playable characters in total: Kiryu, Akiyama, Saejima, Shinada, and Haruka. There's a lot of refreshing and new content in this title that you can get lost in for hours. Every character has their own playable location, which totals to 5 as well. There is a lot to love in this game, and I especially enjoyed the introduction chapters as Kiryu. It's a side to him that we've never really seen, and it still stands out to me all of these games later. I also didn't mind how long it took to finish because I enjoyed almost every section in the game, and it became one of my favorites in the series because of it. 5 feels like a culmination of everything the developers learned throughout releases, and they clearly put their all into it. There is so much to enjoy in this game, and I think the story is also really compelling. It revolves around a truce between the largest Yakuza groups dissolving. The Omi Alliance and Tojo Clan are soon to start fighting again, and to make matters worse, the head of the Tojo Clan, Daigo Dojima, goes missing. It's a really interesting story with a lot of details, making it very intriguing to watch play out. This will probably be a controversial pick, but to me, Yakuza 5 is S tier. Also, shout out to Shinada. He's getting the Tanimura treatment, but hopefully we see him show up again somewhere.
Join Yakuza 6
Yakuza 6 feels like a vacation away from the rest of the series. Instead of playing as 6 characters like you would think, you're back to playing solely as Kiryu. In this title, Kiryu bounces in between Kamurocho and a new location, Hiroshima. The main plot revolves around Haruka falling into a coma after a car accident, and Kiryu is forced to take care of her newly born son Haruto throughout the game, while also searching to find out who the baby's father is. It feels very separate from the rest of the series, like a summer action drama in Hiroshima, where Kiryu is babysitting and uncovering a mystery at the same time. The story is engaging, and the new characters from the Hirose family are all great additions. This was the first game to use the Dragon Engine, and it's clear they were still figuring out its kinks with 6. The combat, as usual, is fun, although it was definitely improved upon in Kiwami 2 soon after. 6 hosts a lot of great side content and things to distract yourself with, and I really loved the setting of Hiroshima. It's a really enjoyable entry that felt like it was supposed to be the last Kiryu-led game, but we all know that isn't the case now. Either way, Yakuza 6 gets an A tier from me.
Kiss of the North Star.
Unexpected, right? This is a spin-off title that many still consider to be a Yakuza game. Fist of the North Star is based on a manga from the 80s, and it's made by the same developers, plays like a Yakuza game, and the main character Kenshiro is even voiced by Takaya Kuroda, who voices Kiryu in the mainline games. I played this expecting something really fun and refreshing, but was left incredibly disappointed after putting a few hours in. Normally, I explain the story a little bit and give you a little bit of details, but this doesn't even get that from me. Don't buy this game, it sucks. If you enjoyed this game, props to you. I don't know how, but you can guess where this one is going. Never again.
Ace Attorney.
Judgment is another spin-off title that, unlike Fist of the North Star, is actually really fun. Both these games came out in 2018, so I figured why not knock them both out at the same time. This game takes place in Kamurocho, as most Yakuza games do, but instead of playing as Kiryu or one of the other protagonists in the series, you play as Takayuki Yagami, a former lawyer turned private detective who solves cases in the city alongside his partner Kaito, who is basically knockoff Kiryu, although he's still a really strong character in his own right. I really like Judgment. I've played through it multiple times, and it has a really great and captivating story. It follows Yagami's case attempting to solve serial murders in Kamurocho by a mysterious killer referred to as the Mole. It's a really gripping narrative, and was a super welcome change of pace from the regular Yakuza formula. The combat also feels different, but still familiar, with improvements and changes to fit Yagami's two new fighting styles, Tiger and Crane. I remember seeing a clip online of this skateboard cutscene in like 2020, and immediately knew I had to play through it. Judgment is a great game. A tier.
Like a Skittoso.
I remember being very hesitant to play Yakuza Like a Dragon initially. After going through 0 through 6 along with Judgment though, I thought, why not? Let's see where the story goes next. I never play turn-based games, and have never really been interested in them in the slightest. Somehow though, Like a Dragon blew my expectations away entirely. Yakuza 7 follows Ichiban Kasuga, another new protagonist who, like Kiryu, took the blame for a murder he didn't commit. Once he gets out, he's thrust into a larger mystery revolving around his former clan, and various Yakuza activities ensue. In this game, you fight in parties, with up to 4 characters. The combat is a blast and super hands-on, which isn't what I expected from something turn-based. Even though I was so hesitant to initially play, after finishing, 7 became one of my favorites in the franchise. Ichiban is an extremely likable protagonist, and the switch to turn-based proved to be a ton of fun. Everything about this game is amazing, from the story, characters, side content, writing, the new location of Ijincho Yokohama alongside Kamurocho. I just really love this game. Yakuza 7 is phenomenal. S tier.
Lost Judgment.
Following the canonical order, for the most part, we are now up to Lost Judgment. This game is a sequel to Judgment and was released in 2021, once again led by Yagami and his partner Kaito. This time around, Yagami is solving a case about a police officer who was accused of some bad stuff, including the murder of a teacher in Ijincho. As the story progresses, the case gets much bigger and more intense, culminating in a really interesting narrative. The best part of Lost Judgment, though, is the combat, in my opinion. And I still think it has one of the best systems in the series. There's 3 base styles: Tiger, Crane, and Snake. Or, I guess 4 if you count the DLC boxing style. And every hit on enemies feels so satisfying and rewarding. The engine feels especially smooth and fine-tuned in this game, and the side content hosts a lot of great activities to enjoy as well. Lost Judgment is another amazing addition to the series that I think deserves an A tier. If the ending was adjusted and perfected a little bit more, this could have been an S. You can also skateboard in this game, so that's pretty cool.
Yakuza Time Travel.
This one isn't in order, but since it released after Lost Judgment, I figured why not put it here. I need y'all to hear me out on this real quick though. I got a confession. I never finished Like a Dragon Ishin. I know, I'm sorry, my bad. This game is a remake of the 2014 Japan-only Ishin. It was remade with translations in 2023, and the remake is a solid game. I had fun with it. Ishin follows Kiryu, Sakamoto Ryoma, in 1860s Japan, in the areas of Tosa and Kyo. Ishin revolves around the Shinsengumi police force that Ryoma enlists in order to get information about his murdered adoptive father, and as always, their narrative expands and becomes a lot larger than that. I like to keep it vague as to not give anything away, and definitely not because this video would be a year long if I went super in depth with every ranking. This game has a very large ensemble cast full of characters and voice actors from previous titles, like Mine from Yakuza 3 and Ryuji Goda from Kiwami 2 and Peak. Basically everyone from the series is here, just as different historical Japanese figures. I really liked that aspect of this game. It was nice to see this formula used for a different era in time. For some reason though, it never hooked me in enough to keep me playing until the very end. The combat is cool, but got very repetitive to me for some reason. Although I can admit it's still an engaging system. It feels much more like an RPG than other games in the series. I got really far into it and put hours in, but I never felt compelled to finish it like the rest of the games in the series. To be fair, I'll put this in the incomplete tier, but I do think if I finished it, it would go in B. It's a good game all in all, just not something I particularly loved.
ザガイフ forgot his name.
The Man Who Erased His Name is another Kiryu-led game, although this time, it's a spin-off that follows the events after Yakuza 6 and bridges the gap to Yakuza 7. In Gaiden, Kiryu is a secret agent for the Daidoji faction, and must do their bidding because of a deal he made with them in 6. Yakuza families get involved, and there's a large boat that looks like this with a coliseum. They were just doing whatever with this game, but it turned out pretty well. Kiryu has two styles in this game, Agent and Yakuza. Agent is a completely new moveset with a Spider-Man web and drones and an explosive cigarette, and Yakuza is his usual brawler moveset from previous games. Sotenbori and part of Ijincho are the maps available in this release. This is a shorter game that still holds all the regular side content that the series is familiar with. The Coliseum in particular stands out though, because you're able to have these huge team fights, as well as play as characters from other games, like Kaito from the Judgement spin-off games or Saejima. Gaiden was a fun game that had a really satisfying ending. B tier.
Infinite Wealth.
Infinite Wealth is another game I thoroughly enjoyed. This was RGG's second turn-based game led by Ichiban once again, but this time he's joined by Kiryu. A majority of Infinite Wealth takes place in Honolulu, Hawaii, a completely new setting for the series. You also visit Yokohama and Kamurocho throughout the narrative, but Hawaii is the most refreshing. Infinite Wealth follows Ichiban's quest to find his birth mother in Hawaii, and as the mystery goes on, the search becomes much larger and more enemies begin joining the larger conspiracy. There's also an evil VTuber who partners with Yakuza members to drag Ichiban's name through the dirt, which makes him and all of his companions from the previous game lose their jobs, so that's interesting. But I really loved playing through Infinite Wealth, and the side content was especially a draw for me in this release. I spent so much time maxing out my Dondoko Island, which is an Animal Crossing-like minigame, and I don't regret a second of it. The story was pretty great, although I did think parts of the ending were a little off. Overall though, I really loved it. This was Kiryu's actual final-led game, and I couldn't be happier with the result in that regard. Infinite Wealth gets an S tier from me.
Pirates of the Caribbean.
We have arrived to the most recent entry at the time of this recording, Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii. Now, I've already made a video about this title, which you should definitely watch if you haven't already, but I liked Pirate Yakuza a lot. This game follows series mainstay Goro Majima, as he loses his memory in Hawaii and becomes a pirate on the search for the Esperanza treasure. Throughout the game, you build your pirate crew, and there's a lot of emphasis on that aspect, which serves the narrative really well. Majima has a lot of heart in this game, and it was really nice to see that side of him emerge from the amnesia. There's a lot to like in Pirate Yakuza, although as expressed in that previous video, the story definitely could have been better. Still a great game though, with a lot of amazing side content. Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii gets a B tier. Okay, that is all the games in the series ranked. There are even more spin-offs that I didn't rank, like the Kuroyo games or Kenzan, but I don't have enough experience with those games to discuss them, so I'll leave them out of this one. As someone who has spent way too much time playing through all these games, it's only right I share my thoughts about this silly series to all of you wonderful people. I really like all of these games, except Fist of the North Star, but every other game on this list has its charm and is worth a shot. If you're on the fence or looking to get into the series, I say go for it. I recommend starting with 0 or Kiwami 1, but if you want a newer release, then start with Yakuza 7, aka Like a Dragon. But that's all I have to say about these games for now. If you enjoyed, leave a like. Of course, you're not obligated to, but it gives me a better idea of what you'd like to see on this channel. Also, feel free to let me know any thoughts you may have about the series or specific games. I know there are some controversial opinions within the community, and I want to hear yours. Thank you so much for watching this far in the video, and I hope to see you again soon. Bye for now.